So good evening and welcome to our February virtual Medea meetup. I'm Bruce Lathrop, a member of the Medea board. I'll be introducing our presenter, but I first wanted to thank Brenda Trainer, who will be helping with the meetup. Brenda will be moderating the chat and live questions. A little bit about Medea. We're a 501c3 educational organization centered at the heart of San Gabriel Valley in Southern California. And our mission is to ensure the region's technical, scientific, and industrial workforce are connected and have the tools they need to be successful by having programs such as this on education, on entrepreneurship, business finance and operations, and technology development and commercialization, all in settings which encourage networking and collaboration among members. Our next meeting will be in person and virtual on March 9th. And our presenter will be Alan Horsinger, who's the CEO of Duet Therapeutics. Again, another company that has a connection with City of Hope, I understand. If you have any feedback on this program or ideas for future programs, please send your comments and suggestions to email@medeatech.org. Stay online after the presentation with your favorite beverage, and we can continue doing some networking. I'll now turn to introducing our presenter. Chris Dyer is the founder and CEO of People GT, a fully remote organization. People GT is routinely ranked as one of the best places to work and has been listed 5 times as one of Inc.'s 5,000 fastest growing companies. As a leadership speaker, Chris's goal is to inspire audiences with a straightforward delivery, insightful candor, and engaging humor. His talks leave audiences permanently transformed, offering innovative perspectives on leadership to improve company culture and empower organizations to discover new success. Countless companies have unlocked productivity, performance, and profits by implementing the strategies from Chris's talks, webinars, and books. His first book, The Power of Company Culture, was a bestseller, and his second book, which we'll be discussing tonight, at least the topic anyway, is Remote Work, which was also a bestseller. Chris enjoys contributing to the leadership conversation, has received numerous accolades, and has been featured by leading media outlets such as BBC, NBC, Telegraph, The Sun, Inc. magazine, and Forbes. So please welcome Chris.
There we go. I had to unmute myself. Well, started right off just about right. Wasn't that the saying of 2021? Can you hear me? Or you're on mute. So thank you all for being here today and letting me speak to you for just a few moments. Certainly the topic of remote work, as I'm sure any of the topics that any of you might consider yourselves an expert on or something you might speak to a group about, probably could not be distilled down into 15 minutes. But I'm going to do my best to kind of give you a little quick overview of who I am, what I'm focusing on, and maybe some of the very common things that I see when I consult with companies, when I go in and do talks or keynotes. Are kind of the very, very most specific things that I see all the time that really employees are struggling with, managers are struggling with, and just to kind of give you a basic overview, and then we can dive into questions, because clearly with a group of this size, you're going to have very specific challenges or things that you're dealing with that we may want to bring up into conversation instead of me maybe diving into an area that isn't of high interest. So I'll go ahead and get going. As you mentioned, my first book was called The Power of Company Culture. So I do kind of view all of the work that I do in remote work around a people-focused solutions, around how do we create good systems and how do we create good atmospheres, but ultimately to drive results through people. So I'm not looking through this as to how do we have the perfect piece of technology that's going to make people do what we want. It's how do we create the right environments to help people drive the results that we want. And we do that through really focusing on our culture and what matters. I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of really cool organizations throughout the years, especially these are some of the ones that we really had to help during COVID. And it's been really interesting to see some very traditional organizations be willing to radically change how they're meeting and how they're operating with their people to take on this new way of working, whether it's flexible, whether it's hybrid, whether it's fully remote, knowing that we're not going to continue the way we were before. My company, People G2, actually, John knows it very well. I've been in a CEO group with him for many years, and actually was able to sell the company at the end of the year. I'm still a part owner in the new organization, but I've been kind of taking everything that I've learned and done being a remote CEO for the last 13 years. We've been doing this long before it was necessary or sexy, and being able to spend a lot more time consulting and helping organizations. So the moment we went remote, we started winning awards. Things started happening, focusing on our culture. Prior to being remote, prior to thinking about a people first focused type of solutions, nobody had heard of us. Nobody was ranking us, as a great place to work. So we really tie these things together as really, really important to the overall story. And then the growth started happening. And it took a few years, but when we made these changes, we then started having rapid growth. In fact, we were 5 times Inc.'s fastest growing 5,000 companies. And then we were fortunate enough to just kind of blow up all over the internet. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the things that we think are really important there. Now, as we talk about remote employees, there isn't a great definition. People don't consistently, if I ask you what is a remote employee, I get a lot of different answers. So I want to kind of talk through what some of those are. The first one is the digital nomad. Now, this is that sexy person you see sitting by the pool in a pina colada with a laptop that they magically can read while sitting in the sun. And they're some fancy digital marketer, consultant, I don't know, lifestyle guru. Those people exist. They're nice people. I've gone on vacations with them. But they're not really what we're talking about here today. It's not really the typical remote worker that we're managing, right? These are independent people that are out kind of, they're entrepreneurs. They're living all around the world. And that's not really what we're focused on today. What we're really looking at is those work from home, working from a specific, location outside of the business address. Work from home has a consistent internet. They have a consistent desk, and they know what to expect, right? They can close their office door. They can control their noise. They know they're going to have their dog behind them to be their office buddy or whatever their setup is, right? It's consistent. And if they want to change that for a day or two, they can, but they can plan that out. The digital nomad is literally worried about when their next bit of internet's coming from day to day. So the where they're focused on, their anxiety, on their setup, all of that is sort of very, very different. We also have the part-time, the side hustles. So if you're driving for Uber, if you are a part-time CFO for somebody, and you're not working in the office, you're also remote. But that is a different context as well, because it's not maybe their main source of income. Then we have off-site and in the field. And this is the one that people always forget about. Plumbers, air conditioning, HVAC repair people, deliveries, Geek Squad from Best Buy. All these people are remote workers. They do not have a consistent workplace. They don't have a desk. They don't have somewhere where they have to be, where they're being monitored, where they're being responsible to a group of people. They're out in the field doing their work. And it's another type of remote work that I think often gets overlooked, but is a really important part. And what we have been finding is that as people do a better job with the work from home group, with a part-time side hustle group, they're also seeing big results and benefits to keeping and motivating their offsite and in the field people. And then the last group is hybrid. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about hybrid in a minute, but if you're allowing people to come in the office and work from home or offsite in some random bit of, if it's 2 days in, 2 days out, or whatever it may be, 50%, hybrid is certainly another bit of context. And I will tell you, it is the hardest one to manage. So what is some of the basics? What is the remote 101? What are the simple things that we see that people need to do and to get right if we want to have good results? Well, we've got to have a dedicated workspace for a majority of their work time. When they're working off a table or in their recliner, in a desk next to their bedroom, it doesn't work, right? My best remote employees always have a dedicated space, just like they would have dedicated space at work. They get dressed, right? I think during the pandemic, we were in our pajamas. People were kind of feeling that, but there's something to getting dressed and feeling like you're ready for the day to start that kind of approach to work. So we do have sort of encourage people to do what they would normally do. We don't need them to dress up. I mean, you don't have to wear a suit and tie or anything, but if you're not putting forth that effort to get ready for the day, we notice a change in their productivity and their outlook. Really, remote workers need to be encouraged to sprint and rest. It's very easy for them not having all the other social cues about when do we stop, when do we go to the coffee pot, when do we go have a meeting, that we really need to help them not to just sit at their desk and work for 4 or 5 hours straight and never get up. And that seems like we shouldn't have to do that, but we were seeing over and over and over again this pattern was happening. So we really encourage employees to do a 45-minute sprint or a 30-minute sprint. I'm sure you've heard of the Pomodoro effect or Pomodoro technique. There's lots of different ones out there, but we always found 45 on, 15 off was a great way to do it. Just discouraging them from just sitting in one place and not moving for a long period of time can really drive productivity and help them not get burned out. Protecting our time, meaning just because we work from home doesn't mean we can babysit or watch someone's dog or go run errands for people. We need to treat their work, from home time as if they were in the office. Being in Southern California, we encourage our people to go outside and, several times a day. It does make a big difference to their outlook and how they feel. Eating their lunch away from their desk. We realized we had 85% of our team eating lunch at their desk. And so they were working and they were answering chats and they never really felt like they got a break. And so they were reporting high levels of burnout. So just hey, step away, go have lunch away from your desk, and encouraging that was huge. Being on video is really important. Now, I'm not a proponent of constant video, but I think it's super important to start on video and end on video for any meeting that is of significant length. Seeing people smile, having that connection, being able to talk to your peers is huge. If everyone shows up and no one's on video, that will contribute to feeling disconnected. We also, on the flip side, we have this funny term called the no mascara day. Now you don't have to wear mascara to call this, but it was just a funny name that allowed people to remember. If you have a bad day and you just can't be on video, anyone can say, I'm having a no mascara day today, which means that's okay. We forgive you. You don't have to be on video today. Maybe you just couldn't get dressed or didn't have the energy to shave, or you have a sick child next to you that you're watching. It's important to allow people days where they just can't be on video to have that hall pass. Good internet is huge. So if they don't have good internet based on how it's being run to their house, can you get them a hotspot? Can you provide them something else to help them make sure they have that good internet? Thinking about mental health is actually kind of on the top 3 or 4 things that managers now need to think about being a remote leader. Are my people healthy? Or how are they handling the different environment that they're in, and not, because we can't observe somebody like we could in an office setting. If you notice that for every day for a week that somebody walked in and looked like they've been crying, you might pull them aside and say, hey, what's going on, right? You would pick up on those cues that they're not doing well. We lose that in the remote setting. So we have to make sure we are thinking about, we're asking proactively in advance. And then we want to stop meeting one-on-one, and I'm going to talk to you more about that a little bit later, and really enforce strict meeting rules. Now, some of the technology basics that we see people kind of messing up is we want to make sure we have something in place for collaboration. Slack, Teams, I don't care what you pick. My personal favorite is Slack, but you need to have a place where we chat, where we put files, where we collaborate. We actually, in making systems that work, we barred people from sending emails internally. So you can send emails to external email addresses, but internally, if you're going to communicate, you're going to share files, you're going to talk, it's got to happen on Slack. That eliminates all of the CCing people's bosses and making sure people send emails and adding everyone on there to make sure everyone knows you're doing work or that you asked this person to do this thing. Instead, we just create rooms with teams and we collaborate in there. There's visibility. Everyone gets that transparency of what's happening. But we don't need to have 9,000 emails going back and forth when you could just quickly read in a chat room what's happening instead of having to read a string full of emails. Yeah, if you need a simple solution, Google Hangouts will work as well. It's certainly free. We use Vidyard to create videos, the training videos. It allows us to record a screen, have a quick little video at the bottom, and we can train someone how to do something, and they can go back and rewatch that video as many times as they need to get that training right. It's sort of our own little mini YouTube inside of our company. Of course, Zoom, GoToMeetings. As long as you have I think a universal platform on where to handle your meetings, I will still to this day. I just had a client the other day. They were using 4 different video programs, and everyone was using a different one, and there was no uniformity, and so everyone was struggling with how to get this, use this platform, and how do you chat on this one, and what are the settings. Just keep it simple. Get yourself a company-wide license and just use one. Uber Conference, Zoho Meetings are not bad as well if you want to have a free version. And then we use, I think, project management is huge. So Basecamp is great, Monday.com is great. Pick a system and use that to drive your projects, keep people accountable, and make sure transparency is there. And last but not least, and this is huge, you got to have mobile redundancy. So pick programs and systems where people can have it on their computer, but they can also have the app on their phones, because the internet goes out, their computers break, and you don't want them to suddenly not be able to work. You need to have those mobile redundancy, or if they need to go run to the doctor, then they can still pick up their phone and answer their teammates and help out, right? If they have a mobile redundant system and programs that will work in both places. The other area that I really think that is important for people to start thinking about, and I mentioned my desire to, in a remote setting, for people to stop having one-on-one meetings, is that we need to force people or encourage people to do more team meetings. And there's some fantastic work that we have taken from the Scrum Alliance, from Scrum and Agile, and also from Google on what makes a great team. So if you can construct your teams in this way, you will find that outcomes really soar, productivity soars, and people are generally very happy, right? We don't have that disconnect. We don't have those complaining about what's happening inside the organization. They don't, not those complaints about culture. We want teams that are self-forming, right? So if you're signed up to be a salesperson, you're on the sales team, you did volunteer to be on that team. But if you're going to be at the party planning committee, well, we want people on that team that want to be there, that volunteer, not that were assigned. 5 to 7 people is ideal. There's a lot of science behind that. If you're in 4 or less, it's hard to get momentum. You get more than 7, it's hard to manage. Jeff Bezos says if 2 large pizzas won't feed your team, you have the wrong number of people there. And then we want to establish unique norms. So I find the first one, what is success? So if we were going to go pick a new client relation management program, if we were going to replace our Salesforce with something else, what does success look like? What do we have to, will the sales team like it? Will the CEO sign off on it? What's our budget? What are all those things that we have to know to be successful? But we often don't talk about what would make us fail. And this is really, really important for teams. Before they get going, they need to identify, if we were to fail, what are those things that would happen, right? Maybe we have to be inside of a certain budget. It doesn't matter what great program we find. If the budget isn't there, we're not going to be, the company's not going to pick that software. So understanding what failure would look like. And then what does conflict resolution look like? This was a big one that Google found. They studied their teams and wanted to know, why did some teams do really well and why did some teams struggle? And the best teams, and I'm simplifying a very large amount of work here, but basically their best teams identified success, identified what failure looks like, and they came up with a conflict resolution strategy in advance before they started work. Was it whatever the leader says goes? Was it democracy? Was it, if we can't make a decision, we bring in a third party? Any strategy is valid as long as the team agrees to that strategy going forward. Now, some of the more advanced things that we learned that really companies struggled with, we were able to articulate through, we had this gentleman, Dr. Aaron Lee, came in and studied People G2 for over a year, and he compared remote companies to traditional companies and found something very surprising. Now, this is the pyramid of what people value inside traditional office settings. Personal connection is the most important foundational piece to their work, to them feeling happy. Then personal satisfaction. Then kind of a family working environment. You feel like you know your people. I think a bit depressing and a bit surprising is then it's professional satisfaction. So professional satisfaction is the fourth most important thing to people at their work in a traditional setting. I would certainly want my people to be more worried about professional satisfaction than what's on this list. Then the social, and then work-life balance is actually is last. In studying remote companies, and mine certainly reflected this as well, the pyramid completely flips. Work-life balance is now the most important thing to anyone who has remote work in their lives. The ability and the authority to manage their time how they want, as much as they're allowed to and it's possible for their work type and their job responsibilities. That is now the most important thing. When I survey my people, I say, what is one of the things that you just absolutely love about working here? And they say that I can go to the doctor and I don't have to take a day off. That my kid can be sick, and if I got to take an hour or I want to go volunteer in their classroom, I can just take an hour and I can go do that and come back and I add an hour on somewhere else. I have the ability to control that in my day. I could have never done that in a traditional office setting. So that is now the most important. Social interaction, feeling like they have these moments of being social with their team is second most important, and professional satisfaction becomes much more important to them actually achieving and accomplishing things that matter. The rest of it, the personal connection, the personal satisfaction, these things are all still important, but they become de-emphasized because we're not playing politics. We're not worrying about what everyone in the office is doing, right? That becomes de-emphasized, and we spend more time with, I can get my work done when I want to get it done. I can see that I had great accomplishments. I had great outcomes, and I can enjoy my team and feel like I'm a part of something that's working. This was mind-blowing and super important for us to continue to build outcomes for our people that they would be happy with, because if we saw dissatisfaction, we started working on personal connections and personal satisfaction, and that wasn't what was important. It was balance. How do we help people have more balance in their lives? So if you're struggling at all with remote work, think about, are you getting in the way of people having work-life balance? Are you getting in the way of social interaction? And are you really valuing their professional satisfaction and making sure you're celebrating that? Because if you aren't, that's probably where you could be getting a little messed up. Now, I know I'm a little short on time here, so I'm going to kind of jump pretty quickly. Make sure we're creating signposts in remote work. So we naturally have this at a traditional office, but we lose it a little bit. So make sure you establish when we check in, when do you collaborate, when do you brainstorm, what kind of meetings, when does this happen, what day does it occur, when do you blow off steam, do you have a wine Friday, do you have a daily stand-up, whatever that means, when does your team blow off steam, and then when do we, and whatever's important to your company. I mentioned it's super important to stop having one-on-one meetings in remote settings. It's slow. It doesn't work. The more team meetings you can have, the better off you can be, the more problems you can solve, the faster you can go. You can't have 20 one-on-one meetings all week with all your direct reports and expect to get anything done. You become the bottleneck to everybody. Get 5 people together, talk about their common problems or common goals, get them free of bottlenecks. And maybe if you have 20 people that report to you, have 4 meetings of 5 people, and you will see totally different outcomes. Make sure we're not having long video meetings, and always curate your meetings to start on time, end early, and there's no agenda. There better not be a meeting, because you're going to talk about 9 different things you didn't need to talk about, because people like to fill up time. And last but not least, ensure understanding by repeating key information. You got to say it, you got to write it, you got to chat it, you got to text it, you got to say it. If it's important, you got to repeat it. Make sure that we get validation from our team members 3 or more times on really key issues, and ask great questions for clarification. And if you need be, I have found this to be really important in team meetings. I've asked them to summarize back what they heard. Half the time they get it wrong, and it's an opportunity for me to go back and say, well, I'm sorry I didn't communicate effectively. This is really what I wanted you to hear, so that we can be very clear with each other. And I'll open it up to questions, but last but not least, if anyone's interested, I do also have an online leadership course for how to lead a remote team. So if anyone needs that help, there's a discount code there. You can get half off. You can always reach out to me if you're interested. And I will shut up now and take any questions you might have.
Very, very interesting. Obviously, you've been thinking about this a lot for a long time. So great details.
I've got a question for you, Chris. You really said one-on-one meetings are no good for remote situation, but I'm not seeing how the remoteness affects that. Are one-on-one meetings also bad if for face-to-face?
I think they're bad all around. However, in a traditional setting, if I know that I need to meet with Jim after he meets with you, right? I can see that. I can generally see Jim. I could see him walking up the stairs, pop in your office, and I know you guys met. And now I know I can go meet with you on the next part of the project. Or I might bump into Jim in the hallway and I'll say, hey, have you met with John yet? Oh, you're meeting with 3? Okay, well, I'll pop in at 4. There's a certain amount of that, like, I can pick up in a traditional office. So one-on-ones are okay in those contexts. I still am a big proponent of team meetings, and Sprint and Agile has really shown us the value of that, but I'm still okay with some of it. In remote, that's gone. I don't know if you and Jim met. I don't know when that's happened. I don't know when I'm supposed to meet with you. And so it becomes this bottleneck, and leaders tend to just say, well, let's just have a one-on-one every Wednesday at 9 a.m. And that becomes the only time I get to access you and the only time I get to talk to you. And if you didn't have that meeting with Jim, well, now I got to wait a whole nother week until I get that answer. Instead of us just coming together, if I know what you, me, Jim, and James, and let's say Jeanette need to talk about something, let's just have a 15-minute meeting as a group and we can get unstuck and talk about things. That becomes amplified in a remote organization. I think anything project-based, it doesn't matter. I think you should be doing team stuff anyways. But I remember we lost all of that. That was the first thing we really struggled with when we went from brick and mortar to remote, is no one knew when it was time to meet with each other because we used to be able to just see it, and we lost the visibility of that. Does that make sense?
One of the things that I'm a little confused about, excuse me, I'll put my video back on. I don't know enough about you and what your company function was and how you transitioned out of brick and mortar to all remote. You know, how do you reach your clients? How do you develop those things? I mean, your bio had significant numbers of employees, but what all are the tasks that you're performing?
Sure. So People G2 is a background check company. So we're working with applicants. We're working with independent contractors across the country. We're working with clients. When we were traditional brick and mortar, the only reason we went remote was because it was the recession of 2009. And I said, well, our lease is coming up. I know we can save a whole bunch of money. Let's save the money, not have to lay people off. And I did it purely for financial reasons. Within 2 weeks, every employee had called me and said, this is the best thing we've ever done. Please don't make us go back. I love working remote. I get so much more work done, right? I don't have to drive into work. I don't have to buy food. It was all these different reasons. And so we said, that was a light bulb moment. I wasn't expecting them to be so happy with remote work. But then we had to turn around and figure out how to do it better. To your point, how do we communicate with clients? We were fortunate that a lot of technologies were sort of taking off then. And so our internal systems, how we collaborate, phone systems, all these different things, we were able to take advantage of the new technologies to make us appear like we were a brick and mortar. So for years, we pretended we were in an office together because it wasn't cool to be remote. It was actually kind of a negative. And then about, 2015, 16, we just, pulled the curtain off and said, guess what, we're fully remote. And we would just sort of wore it as a badge of honor.
So
how do you look at productivity in terms of the difference between in the workplace and away? And
Mhm.
do different business situations lend themselves more to remote versus certain business situations that I don't know still are better one-on-one? And how do you measure that?
Sure. So the measurement part is complex, right? I have employees that do verifications or do I mean, they have searches assigned to them, and I can see how many searches they did and how many hours did they work and what do they get paid, and we can create a very clear line to productivity and ROI, right? That part's easy. The hardest part is like my managers. How do I measure productivity for them? So in that context, we come up with very clear goals for their department, very clear KPIs that they're managing across the department, and we use that as a way to measure their, are they doing a good job? The second part of your question is there are jobs that cannot be remote or are not very effective. You have to be in the vineyard to make wine, right? You got to be in the hangar to make an airplane. I mean, there are jobs that are just not going to move over. And so every employer has to make that evaluation on, does it make sense for them to be hybrid, remote, or do they need to be there all the time? And I think any job where you can allow flexibility, you should. And any job where that just doesn't make sense, well, then of course you keep it. The next question is usually, well, then how do we deal with the fairness factor? These group of people get to be remote. This group of people have to be in the office. I've seen it. The warehouse team, they have to be in the warehouse, but customer service, sales, accounting, they can be remote. And so organizations have to get really, really clever about how do you provide certain benefits and rewards and outcomes for those that have to come in the office, because the people that are remote are getting different outcomes, rewards, and benefits for not having to drive into the office every day, and coming up with something that their employees are happy with. And we've seen people get really creative with that.
So I've read studies that said that companies have found that they can hire better people because they're not geographically constrained. Have you found that to be true as well? And can you measure that?
Yes. So there's a lot of studies, and I forgot to, for James's question, there's actually quite a few studies, if you need them, about the higher increases in productivity around remote workers, people being shocked at how much more productive they were, especially into COVID. To your question, Jim, we found that we were able to hire the same great person, like a head of marketing or a head of customer service or whatever, but we would hire them in Kansas or in Texas or in Arizona, and they were half the price because I wasn't competing in an LA market where cost of living is higher, the competitive market is there, like just, wages are being driven up just because of the competitiveness. So there are some challenges if you want to change your geographical footprint. You need to make sure that you understand what having an employee in that state means. Sometimes that can have an impact on tax status. It can have an impact on, you have to be licensed there or not, or register in that state. You got to have a good payroll company who knows how to pay payroll tax in that state, which is different than California. You need some of those resources in place. But
time zone issues.
And time zone issues is another one. But just from the legal compliance standpoint, you need to think that through a little bit. But absolutely, I have saved so much money by sending out some of these jobs to other locations. Now, for us, the time zone thing was a benefit because I could hire people I have clients all around the country. So I could have customer service agents that were there to answer the phone for them. I didn't have the California issue where people on the East Coast saying, we're not going to choose you because you're not going to pick up the phone, right, until noon our time. We don't want that. Well, no. We have staff in your time zone. And that was a good benefit. When you get more than 5 time zones out, you start to have real issues with you have to kind of shift to asynchronous work. It's really, I think 3 is really kind of the max, but I've seen people do it across up to 5. But can you imagine if someone working in Hawaii trying to communicate with someone in England? I mean, it gets just to be, you really can't communicate live. You have to create a different way of working where you're leaving sort of work and messages and people can pick up work that was being left off.
Right.
So do you advocate, you talked about having teams. Would you have 5 people on a Zoom, but they're not necessarily conversing. They're just working on the same project. And sometimes they, like you're in a virtual conference room where you're not actually having the one-on-one meeting. You're having just the team together in a conference room. I've never done that. I'm just wondering if that's done.
Yeah, I have seen organizations do that where they are co-coding or they're literally working on all the same thing at the same time. And maybe they don't need to be talking all the time, but they need to be on because they're constantly need each other. Like just like if they were working in a room together. I have seen that. What is more common is that the team is in a chat room, right? They have a specific room for that group where they can be talking and pinging each other. And then what they do, and I didn't get to talk to you guys today about all the meeting types that we do, but our most common meeting type is called a cockroach meeting. It's a 15-minute meeting or less. It's one problem. It's optional to attend, right? And anyone can call it. The manager doesn't have to call it. Anybody can call it, and they can invite anybody they want. So my team has about 30 to 40 cockroach meetings a day. So what they would do is if that team is working together on a project, they might say, hey, why don't we have a quick cockroach? And they would start a video call. And now they just have a quick video call to talk about those things going on and then get off the call. So they're not having to be constantly in front of someone, constantly on that camera and having that pressure, right? So I always want to kind of eliminate that stuff. Are you sitting at your desk? Are you working? What are you doing? Are you eating a Big Mac and it's driving everyone crazy because you're slurping food or what? All the bad human behaviors that we kind of don't miss when we're in a remote setting. But
Chris, do your cockroaches wear mascara?
Yes.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat box from Hannah. She's said that you mentioned that a hybrid scenario with part-time in the office and part-time remote is a particularly difficult working environment. And she'd like you to elaborate on that. Are there any tips on how to optimize that kind of hybrid work? And do the two pyramids contribute to the difficulty? People want different things depending on whether they're remote or in person. And how does that integrate? How do you put those two pyramids together?
Yeah. So the research that we have been able to do with a lot of our clients and we actually Cornerstone on Demand was a big help in providing a lot of research that they did. What we found was that if you treat hybrid as fully remote, if everyone acts as if they're remote, then hybrid can work. But if what you have is 3 people who are in the conference room and are consistently there and 2 people that aren't, you have a disconnect, right? You have an imbalance because to your point, what the 3 want is different than what the other 2 want. If you have people constantly, they have a lot of freedom in their schedule and what you want is for them to be there twice a week, but they can be out 3 days a week, but there's a lot of variable who's going to be in and who's not. We don't really know. Again, everyone pretending that they're fully remote. What does that mean? Everyone pulls up their computer and goes on the Zoom. Even if you're in the office, nobody goes to a conference room together. Everyone pretends that they're remote. We all collaborate on Slack. We all collaborate as if we're not together. That eliminates 90% of the problems. Where it's difficult is if you have those middle managers that still think if I can see you, you must be doing a good job. And if I see the paper rustling and you walking up and down the halls, you must be busy and your productivity is high, right? We all know that's a bunch of BS. That's not how to measure people. That's not a good source of productivity. But if your middle managers don't have that insight to understand that we need to be looking at better ways to measure our people, then we can be promoting the wrong people and hybrid can be contributing to that.
Jordan is asking how to respond appropriately to the realities of that pyramid flip, very much related, given that his business model, which is a consulting firm, requires that most of the employees, the billable resources, are on the clock most of the days of the day, week, and year. Are there some best practices for remote recruiting and onboarding remote employees?
2 different questions.
Yeah. Oh, good. You're off mic. So go ahead and ask engage, Jordan.
So, Jordan, I think if you're looking at, if you're a consulting firm and you have billable hours, I would think there'd be some flexibility that you could stop for an hour, right? And you could do your billable hour some other time. I don't know if maybe there's a constriction to business hours when you have to be doing that billable time. Maybe there's, and again, that gets back to the specific job. If you have to be on 9 to 5, right? And there's no way for you to do work at 8 and then take off from 1 to 2, then you have constraints that are going to be a challenge. That it doesn't, you're not going to have flexibility. But if you can create flexibility, and I have people that work for me that say, I really want to be able to take my kid to school and I really want to be able to pick them up. And so they block that time and then they add time in other parts of their day so they're still getting the 8 hours in there during general business hours, but they can be gone to go do that for their kids and they're not having to take time off or whatever. But we know they're going to be gone. They block it off in their calendar and it makes sense. So I think it just will depend on if you're restricted. I mean, I have people that call on verifications. They have to call during business hours. They cannot choose to work at 1 o'clock in the morning. But my research team, they need to do research. They can work at 1 o'clock in the morning if that's what they want to do. So there is flexibility based on the job type, what is required. Best practices for remote recruiting. There are a couple things I like to do in job. I don't know how applicable this might be today, but anytime we have asked people in a recruiting setting they've made it through the first round of they might be a viable candidate, we ask them to kind of do a couple things and take some personality tests. I asked them to answer this one question: tell me the difference between Louis Armstrong, Lance Armstrong, and Neil Armstrong. And it seems silly because I'm not asking them on the spot. I would never ask someone that in an interview. I'm asking them that to fill that out on a form because I want to know, how do they answer that question? If it's someone in sales and I get kind of a funny, quirky answer, and I can pick up on their personality. If I'm hiring for research and they literally copy and paste the whole Wikipedia block, I'm happy. They went and did the research. They knew how to deliver to me the answer, the full research. Cool. I can pick up by kind of asking them those questions. And then I ask them to schedule time on my calendar by clicking a link. And then can they show up to the Zoom call? Can they use their camera? Do they know how to do that stuff? If they do, half the battle is over, right? They can manage, they can be a remote employee. Now, are they a good fit for the position? That's a whole other thing. The good news is there's a lot of great recruiting companies out there that have gotten really good at hiring for remote as well because it's become such a thing. So if you need any suggestions there, I know a few as well.
Now, I don't know if you can see the chat room questions, Chris, but I know that Jim has got his mic working now. So if you want to go in and share your question, Jim, in real time, go ahead and unmute. And hello, Jim Picker.
I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. I just posted my email address.
Like he was saying he can help with that. So
I thought you were looking for help on that. All right, well, let's go to Chris as the next one. Sam Kurtz, not Chris. Sam Kurtz. The top 101 list has dedicated space. Is there a way to have better flexibility for flexible space? Is that really a requirement?
I think what I meant was, so Chris, we live in a high population density, space scarce area, right? And, for some of us, we can't pick up stakes and move to Kansas and, buy a house with a dedicated office and whatnot.
Right.
So what in your, what are you actually kind of requiring that your workforce have a dedicated space? Are you going to give them a, 50% raise to, buy a bigger house or build a tough shed office, or what do you suggest?
Well, so I'm not going to go that extreme, but what we do is talk to them about, and this is not a part of the decision-making process to hire them, but once they're hired, then we talk to them about the importance of a dedicated space, and we figure out what we can do that makes sense for them. I've hired people that are in a one-bedroom apartment, right? And so what they can do is very different. But what I have done is said, okay, I'm going to get you the world's tiniest standing desk or a small desk. It's a small thing that you can use that's dedicated, because I don't want them sharing that space. I don't want their kids working on there at night. I don't want their spouse paying the bills there at night. If I can at all get them something that's dedicated to their time with us, it does make a big difference. One, just that they can keep their space reliable. Two, when they leave that space, it's like when they leave work. It's like when you get in the car and drive home, you kind of have this mental break that I'm done with work. So when they're done with that space, they can turn off, and again, work-life balance, right? I don't want them to feel like they're constantly working because the computer they work on is the same one their kids work on, is the same one that they watch YouTube on or Netflix on. I want a distinction. I've even bought people those little, you ever seen those little like old-fashioned like dressing room barriers, right? They're kind of like, I forget what you call them. They're kind of those little easily
A
things.
dressing screen.
Dressing
Partition.
Partition. I've bought people those, and they put those up in a corner. So they just had a little space that was theirs, even if all the noise and things weren't totally blocked. It still created that sense of it being separate. And that helped them a lot. And I haven't had anybody who hasn't been able to create something, some small way, a space that was kind of dedicated in that way.
Chris, I have a question about the pyramids, like the older one and the new one. So I'm assuming that not 100% of the workforce is into, work-family balance. So my question is, first of all, what percentage in that poll were really, came up with that particular pyramid? And then I'm also assuming that not everybody fits into that pyramid. So how do you work with the fact that there may be some people, maybe 60% fit within that pyramid, but is there 40% that don't fit within that pyramid, either with the old one or some new things? So how do you deal with different people and the different views on the pyramid, or their different positions in the pyramid?
Right. So to give you context, between the biggest bars between the two, it was in the 70 percentile, was what that was listed as the number one by those employees. Now, to your point, you go and talk to an individual employee, and there's going to be a huge variance, right? So the pyramids show you the aggregate of the data, and these are thousands and thousands of employees that they surveyed. But individually, of course, you're going to find it different. Now, I have yet to find a person who is working remotely, who has done it for a period of time, that likes it and is continuing to do it, that does not value that work-life balance, that autonomy, that ability to manage their time how they want, in the top one or two. Like once they get it, once they get a taste of it, that they can walk downstairs and move the laundry over, right? Or have their dog with them, or that they, these little things, right? They can go take a walk for 15 minutes around the neighborhood and no one's going to judge them for not sitting at their desk all day. Those types of things they really value. Of course, when you're managing a team, it's important to understand what's important to each person. And that's a great way to manage somebody, because if what they really care about, if you individually, you get that outlier, that's someone who says, all I care about is professional satisfaction, that's my number one, and personal connections my number two, you got to manage to that, right? Because we have individual people that are different. But we put forth strategies first that try to help people with work-life balance. That's the area. If we screw that up, if we start doing things, start asking people to answer emails on the weekend, and I start texting them on a Sunday, and I start doing stuff as the leader that's going to disrupt that, I see huge drops in satisfaction, harmony. I start losing people, right? If I'm not protecting that, right? That doesn't mean they can do whatever they want and they can work whenever they want, right? It just means they have some flexibility in there of what makes sense based on the job, and I'm willing to support that. I'll give you one quick example. We do a thing called an ostrich meeting. Now, an ostrich meeting is just like a cockroach meeting, but it's helped me get my head out of the sand, help me learn something, help me find out something. But we also use the ostrich meeting when someone returns from vacation. So we tell people we want them to have work-life balance. So But yet we noticed people were checking their emails when they were on vacation. We noticed people were showing up to conference calls when they were in Hawaii and they should have been with their kids running on the beach, but they were still showing up because they care about the company and they care about the bottom line, right? And so they felt pressure to be there. So we told them, if you're wired, you're fired. That was the first thing. We do not want you to do that. But the other thing we had to add was this ostrich meeting. When they came back from vacation, they had to have a 15-minute meeting with their team to get caught up. What did I miss, guys? Hey, everyone tell me what I missed. What's important for me to know from when I was gone? What should I pay attention to? What's junk and I cannot worry about? You guys took care of. And then they screen share. They go into their inbox. They select all, and they delete every email that came in while they're on vacation. And their team and their manager watches them do this. And they cheer for them that they're at inbox 0 when they come back from vacation. Now, their team might say, listen, you know that one client that you're in charge of that's a giant pain in our butt? You probably should go back and read those 5 emails because it's going to come up this week, right? You're going to have to deal with that. But all the other stuff, we got it. We took care of it. You don't need to read it. We also we tell our people to put an out of office message that says your email will not be read. It will be deleted. Here's who you contact while I'm gone, or resend your email on this date when I return to the office. So the person sending the email has an expectation of what's going to happen. And internally, we've told our people, we care about work-life balance. We don't want you to read your emails while you're gone. We're going to take care of it. And anything you miss, we'll make sure you're okay. We'll fill you in. The only exception I've ever had to make was for salespeople closing like a really big deal. And they said, listen, I'm not missing that call, even if I'm in Hawaii. If that's going to really contribute to my bottom, I'm going to get a huge bonus. I'm not missing that call. And we said, okay, in those rare instances, we'll allow it, right? But that's how you support work-life balance. Those are the kinds of things that employees need leaders to do for us to be successful.
When you're hiring people, Chris, do you do a personality analysis? This is occurring to me because I'm thinking control freak people are not going to be comfortable in that environment. And sometimes it works in a team, sometimes it doesn't work for the team. Mm-hmm. How is it that you analyze that ahead of time?
So we do some personality testing for key jobs, like for managers. And I want to see, are they willing to try new things? Are they lifelong learners? Are they adaptable? I mean, those types of things I look for in leaders. We do assessments for salespeople because they need to be really successful at that, right? We outsource a lot of our other key functions like marketing and IT. So we hire experts that we know could do a good job. My average employee, we don't do any assessments. We hire on potential. And so we're looking for people that have a potential that could do a good job, that could fit in our company, that seem like the kind of person who could grow and be there. So I'm not so worried. I don't really run into those kind of like micromanagey, people. If they're that way, they don't tend to last, because if we're supporting the system as a whole and we don't support that kind of behavior, they don't tend to last. It doesn't work for them, right? Because they want to draw everyone else into their anxiety to triple check everything and send 900 emails about something that we could have just met for 5 minutes about. We seem to kind of push that out a little bit.
So what we talked before everybody joined about how this region and others can bring people together, and because when you're remote, I do think you need to bring people together monthly or whatever to actually interact. So how do you prescribe that, and what does that look like to you? And kind of how could we adapt? So I know like John Tanner has some space, conference rooms. How do you bring people together once in a while, and how does the region cater to the work from home crowd?
So because my people were dispersed all across the country, we only got together once a year. It was a mandatory holiday party. We flew them in, put them in a hotel. We did one day of team fun meetings, some serious stuff, some fun stuff. And then we had a holiday party at night. And the next day they had to themselves. They could bring a spouse. They could or anybody a date, they had to pay for that part. We only paid for their ticket and their, but if they wanted to come into Orange County, for a lot of people was a big deal. So they maybe made a vacation out of it. We just required it once a year, and we found that was enough. All the other interactions we do as a team, and we're on camera and we're doing stuff, was they just got together once a year. That was enough. But if your people are all semi-local, once a month is great. If they are into that, and you guys can have a lunch once a month, or have a team building exercise, or maybe it's, Friday mornings, you guys go see a movie. I mean, whatever that activity is, I'm all for it. Just make sure that you have surveyed your team anonymously to really get a sense of what they want. Because I have found often what the manager wants is to be seen, and wants to tell dumb jokes, and wants their people to laugh at them, and wants to feel important, and they want people to be around them so they can feel good about themselves. This middle manager, it's not really what the staff wants, right? The staff may want to get together because they want to collaborate with their team. Great, then do something that's collaborative for the team. But if you allow the manager to dictate it, it's often what the manager wants out of it. And you get people who are just pissed off that they had to drive all the way in once a month for a meeting that didn't matter, that they could have done on Zoom, right? If there isn't a real outcome or a real reason to be there, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Both Sam and Jordan have some interesting questions in there. Sam, you want to jump in?
Yeah, Chris. So this might not be related to remote work, but this is something that I know a lot of companies have transitioned to during this kind of remote time, where they, a lot of companies have changed to, at least high-tech companies have changed to more of like a Netflix style vacation policy, where you essentially have either infinite vacation, or for most people, they have like no vacation. Because you no longer have that leverage over, your employer to say, hey, I maxed out on my vacation time. I really need to take some vacation time. You don't have that metric. They say take vacation when you need it, but when you're busy all the time, people effectively don't take vacation.
Yeah. So I'm all for it if it's done appropriately. So you can't do it with your hourly employees. They have to, at least in California, as far as I know, they have to accrue vacation. But your salaried employees, your exempt employees, you can put them on this sort of unlimited vacation type of a system. It has worked really well for us because it's taken off all that pressure, and allows managers and allows people the flexibility to say, you know what, this year I only had time for 10 days and I'm happy to do like 2 months next year. But we had something going on in our department where, we had some people out or on leave. It just didn't work for me to be gone as much. Or I had people say, I don't have anywhere to go. It's the pandemic. Don't make me take vacation this year. Can I save it up? I would rather, do it when we actually can go somewhere. Like, I don't want to take a vacation on my couch, so we were able to be flexible with people that way. So I'm for it, but we have seen Netflix has struggled with this, and some of the other Silicon Valley companies have struggled with this, where they say, you have unlimited, you can take it when you want, but then they overwork them so much they never take it. And basically what ends up happening is they don't really ever take it, and then they burn out, and then they leave and go to the next job, and they just build in a 3-month cushion so they get to go take a vacation in between jobs. And so no one's really taking vacation, and they understand they're just getting more out of them. So if it's not being implemented in an evil way, I think it's great for people to be able to have that flexibility. They can take 3 weeks this year or whatever, 2 weeks the next. But you just have to be really careful. And you have to have a high trust with your people, because I trusted no one was ever going to take 6 months off, right? Or we were going to have a problem. I said unlimited, but if they took 6 months off, it really wasn't unlimited, right?
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Jordan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I heard an interesting take on that, by the way. They said if the employee's ahead of all their projects, so they have certain metrics in place that they can ensure kind of like mitigate some of the risk, right?
Yeah.
It's like they can't take the 6 months. Well, they're ahead of everything, right? Well, they would never be able to be ahead of everything if they took 6 months off, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
question, I was really interested in your hire based on potential. And we constantly debate on this, that, because we all aspire to that, except that whenever we do hire someone who's green, it costs us like even more than the experienced hire if we would hire them in training and lack of productivity on our experienced people. So how did you overcome that? Because I'm sure that's just a reality when you're first starting out.
Yeah. So I'm always looking for Jedis. And these Jedis are these people that you can see it in their history. Where it's not so potential. Sometimes we make the mistake of like, well, I believe they could do it. They seem smart. But then there's people on their resumes where you're like, okay, so you started off as volunteering on the swim team, and in 2 years you were the head coach of the swim team, right? That's potential. I see you started off as a server and you left as a manager. That's potential. Any place you go somewhere, you seem to grow into things, or you seem to take on more responsibilities, and that's potential. And so that's really hard to gauge if someone's fresh out of college, maybe a little bit with what they've done. Maybe you could see that they were, I don't know, in the second year in their sorority or fraternity, they took on a leadership role. In the third year, they were the president. That potential, right? That's one way we kind of gauge it. The other way is I'll ask them. I mean, like, if you're not quite sure, I'll ask them, what's the last 2 books you read? I mean, that right there will tell me usually the answer to my question. Because if it's and I don't know, and they make up something, or it's like something I read in school, my potential people are like, oh, I just got done reading A 4-Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss, and I just read this one, and you're like, okay, right? You have an ability to learn quickly. You have a thirst for knowledge, and I'm gonna be able to give you information, and you're gonna be able to get there quickly. The last thing I'll say is there's definitely going to be jobs where you're gonna have to have the technical know-how. Right? I can't hire for potential. I can't hire a programmer on potential. If you don't know how to code, you don't know how to code, right? Now, maybe they only know how to code on Python and you need them to code on something else. Do they have the potential to learn? Okay, sure, right? So you have to kind of, I think, job by job decide how much potential we're willing to do, how much technical do they have to have. I just don't like overpaying. I don't like paying for experience. I'm happy to pay for ability. And if they have gone to school, they have technical abilities, I will pay for that all day long. I don't want to pay for, just because you've been doing it for 30 years, I owe you twice the salary. So that's where that kind of balance comes in.
One of the things that we haven't hit on, and if you're doing background checks, I suspect it is even more critical, is maintaining the security not only of your data, but of the remote workspaces.
Mm-hmm.
In so many businesses, you can't take a laptop out of the building, and here you are, there's not a building to keep a laptop in. How have you approached security concerns?
Yeah, so we do a lot of education. I think there's a lot of different approaches people can take. I mean, if bank tellers could be remote workers, there's got to be a way for you to be able to do this, right? There are a certain amount of security systems and VPNs and SharePoints, and you can take it to the extreme of whatever's appropriate for your organization. What's been nice for us, because we outsource our IT and outsource our platform, that we were not hosting it ourselves, and there was a bit of a buffer that even if somebody completely screwed up and their computer was taken over and hackers got it, there was a barrier between their machine and our critical systems. So knock on wood, it's never happened, but we could have just taken their computer, thrown it in the trash, got them a new one, and for $1,500 started over again, right? And mitigated the risk. For other companies, that's not the case, right? They're tied into key systems through those things. So they need to have those VPNs. They need to have those SharePoints and other systems to be able to deal with data. But I find the biggest problem that companies have is just poor education for remote workers on basic scams. No one's ever going to ask you to go to the store and buy gift cards, right? No one will ever ask you. No one will ever send you a form. There's certain things like changing your payroll accounts. There's certain education that we talk to our employees about every single month. I remind them every month on our company-wide call. I will never ask you to send me money or buy gift cards. I will never contact you by email for anything financial. I mean, because they get hit all the time. They get hit with the most clever scams. People, it looks looks so legit. I have people that will text me or Slack me and say, did you just ask me to go and get you? I mean, I'm like, I told you every month I will never ask you to do this, right? But it's a constant education, and it's difficult. So good practices to protect yourself, but good communication, I think, with your team on how to watch out for those kinds of fraudulent activities.
And we find that user training is the most important part of that. That's the most vulnerable aspect of security.
Yep.
Yeah, so there, I mean, this is in my wheelhouse, and in our company, we actually have educated, fake phishing emails that they deliver to
Right.
the staff on occasion, and then they generate metrics from that. You read Wall Street Journal articles. There are some companies that take that so seriously, it's like 3 strikes and you're out.
And I think that's a good policy, at least having someone like yourself come in and test your people. Have them, those fake phishing emails, see who's vulnerable. Because you have a certain group of people that, whether it's because they're overworked, whether it's because they're not meticulous, whether it's because they're lazy, I don't know. They click on stuff they shouldn't be clicking on. You got to know that. So there's definitely good ways to protect yourself.
Well,
And we have done that. We have done the testing as well.
is there any last urgent questions before we let Chris take a break? If not, thank you very much. It was it was a fascinating presentation, and like I said, you obviously have lived the dream, so to speak, I guess. And also sounds like you're a really awesome manager and let your employees live their lives and also do good work for you. So, round of applause.
Thank you.
And I will take it off of